Good morning, everyone. Can you all hear me? You can hear me, please drop a chat in the comment section. Okay, so welcome to today's class. And in today's class, we'll be looking at CSS Advanced. We'll be looking at concepts like the grid, and also be exploring responsive design. So, but before I move on, I hope we've all been able to access the assignments that were given in the past. I noticed that a few of us have just submitted, so if you've not taken the assignment, kindly do so. And if you don't know where to find the assignment, it's on the MarkTech platform. So once you enter into a course section or a course module, you see it at the bottom of your screen under the assignments panel. So you can also find the resources there under the resources panel. So every assignment and every resources so far has been posted on the MarkTech platform. So we can find them there. All right. So please, if you have questions or you want to speak, kindly raise your hand or drop a comment in the chat. Okay. So let's move to today's topic. So today we'll be covering
This meeting is being
CSS
recorded.
Grid and responsive design. So it's expected of us to have taken the module for week 5. Or if you've not taken the module for week 5, it's expected that we've taken the module from week 1 to 4. Right. So once you take the module, it will enhance your understanding of what is being taught in these live sessions. Okay. So what would we be looking at today? We'll be looking at, we introduce the topic first, then we'll look at CSS Grid Layout and what it entails. Then we also look at responsive design, and then we conclude. So it's not going to be too long. It's just for us to enhance our understanding of this concept. Okay. So we might want to code along during the live session. We might choose to use a coding environment of our choice, but I use Visual Studio Code. And then you might also want to install some extensions like the Emmet, the Live Server, the HTML, CSS support. So you also require a basic knowledge of HTML and CSS, follow along, okay? So let's take the introduction now. So in the ever-evolving landscape of web development, creating visually appealing and user-friendly websites across a multitude of devices is paramount. So I don't know if you've noticed, there is always a different design for different devices that we use. Not necessarily a different design, but a different outlook or a different look to a website or to a web application for each device that we have. So, and this is possible due to two fundamental concepts. So we have the grid systems, which is just a little of this, and responsive design, which is the majority, which affects this majorly, okay? So why we are able to see the different looks on different devices is because of responsive design. So responsive design is just like designing a website or a web page or a web application for different screen sizes. So we have a different look for mobile. We have a different look for tablets. they have a different look for desktops. Okay, so it's due to this responsive design and other concepts like grid systems and flexbox that makes us able to design different looks or outlooks for different devices. So while there are two distinct concepts, that is grid systems and responsive design, they work synergistically to deliver consistent and adaptable user experiences. Okay, so the grid system is different from responsive design, but we also use grid systems in making responsive design. Or responsive design as a whole involves making screen pages or website pages for different devices, right? So let's move on. So now we'll be exploring the CSS grid layout. So what is a grid system? So a grid system is a structural framework composed of intersecting horizontal and vertical lines that create a series of columns and rows. This invisible structure provides a blueprint for organizing and arranging content on a web page. And think of it as an underlying skeleton upon which the visual elements are built. So what do we mean here? So the English definition of a grid system is just an intersection between rows and columns. So this intersection forms a grid, right? And so because we have rows and columns now, we can place each item on our web page on specific rows and specific columns. All right, so this is why it's referred to as a grid system. So it's just an intersection of lines in which you can visually place elements on. So let's move on to the next one. So now we have some basic characteristics of grid systems. So the first one are the columns. So columns are vertical, I call them lines, or vertical planes that are used in grid systems. Then we also have the gutters. So gutters are spaces between these rows and columns. So we can see column 1 here, column 2, column 3, right? There are 3 columns here, and there are 2 rows, right? So we can see this blue spacing in between these rows and columns. They are known as gutters. So these gutters just had space between the rows and the columns to make the website much more appealing and visually appealing. Then the third one is the margins. So I'm sure we all know what margins are by now, or we should all know what margins are by now. So from those of us present, who can tell us what a margin is? So I'll be expecting your replies. What is a margin? Can anybody tell us what a margin is? I'm still waiting for your replies. So since nobody is saying anything, I'll just move on. So margins are the space that separates a particular content from the other content. It was explained during the box model. So if we don't get it, you can always rewatch past recordings. So if there was another element outside of this, this will be regarded as a margin. So there will be a space separating this element from the other element. So that's referred to as the margin. So the margin is the outside space that separates a particular element from another element. Then the inside space is referred to as padding. Okay, so let's not forget. Then we also have the rows. So the rows are horizontal planes that run across through a grid system. And lastly, we have the modules or units. So in this diagram, referred to as cells. So each module or unit or each cell is formed by the intersection of these columns and rows. So it's like dividing them into different boxes, which you can now place items on. All right. So let's quickly see an example. So I'll move to my Visual Studio Code. I'm going to create a new folder. Inside this folder, I'm going to add a new HTML file. I'm just going to call it grid.html. And I will add a CSS file to that grid folder too. So grid.css. Right, so let me reopen this folder. Right. I hope we're following. If we are following, just drop a yes in the chat. So I'm using my Emmet extension now to declare the doc type. So easy. You don't need to cram all these things. Okay, so I'm going to call this grid example. I'm going to save that. So I'm going to populate this with some divs. So I'm going to call this the dot main, or let me use the semantic tag main and give it a class name of main. So inside this main container, I'm going to have some grid items. So I'm going to have div grid item 1. And then I'm just going to make 3 copies of this. So I'm going to call this grid item 2 to have a class name of grid item 2. And then this you have grid item 3. All right. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to link the CSS style sheet. And how we do that is using the link tag. So I'm going to go to my head section. You can see the head section there. And go to the next line. Then include the CSS link. Just going to change this to grid.css. Okay, then let me launch this. So I'll go live to see. Okay. So let's check. I think this opened on a different desktop. Right, so let me just rename this. So we have grid item 1, grid item 2, and grid item 3. I'll change this to third, change this to second. Right. So I'm going to reset the CSS. So I'll use the universal selector. That selects all the elements in the HTML and then give them a margin of 0, a padding of 0, and box sizing of border box. I'm going to save. Then I view my browser. So the space has been reset. So what I'm going to do now, okay, let's remove all the contents that are available in here. So I will just use colors so that we can see how it will look like. So I'm going to give these containers different colors. So I'll go to my CSS. I'm just going to style the body a bit. Add padding of 40 pixels. All around. So let's see how it looks like. Okay, so no content yet. So I'm going to start styling the HTML. So let me just split my screen. So I have the grid item 1. So I have to select the min first and give it a grid. Oh, okay, before we even get to that, let's add colors to the containers. So I'm going to style the 1. So that's dot min, then dot grid item 1. So this is telling me that this grid item 1 is under the class of min. So it's like a child of this parent element. All right. So I'm going to give it a background color of yellow. Then I'll just copy this. So let's give it a width too. Let's give it a width of, let's say 50 pixels. And height of 50 pixels too. So same thing. The third one will be red. The second one will be red rather, and the third one will be blue. So let's see that. So you can see those 3 boxes. So let me just remove the width. So let's see. This should be a block element. So it will extend towards the end. So I'm just commenting out the colors, or the width rather. Item 1. Okay, let's make this bigger. 300 pixels. Let's say 300 by 300. Okay, I think this is better. Hope we are following. If we are following, let's drop a comment in the chat. Just type yes. So now I have these 3 boxes in my HTML. So what I want to do next is to place them in a grid system. So the first thing I need to do is to make the main container a grid system. So how do I do that? So I just need to select this main container over here and then turn it into a grid. So I'll just change the display to grid. So I've selected the main container here and I have display of grid. Okay. So you can, in your grid system, you can choose to have the number of columns or the number of rows that you want to have in your grid system. So you can do that using grid template columns. So the number of columns that you want to have, you can just put it there. So you can say repeat. So I want to repeat 3 columns, 1 fraction each, but let's use pixels. So let's say we want 1 column to be 300 pixels wide. All right. And then we can also specify the number of rows we want to. So let's also use 3 rows. And then we can place a gap. So this gap, we add the gutter to the grid system. You know, we also have gap in Flexbox. So this gap, we add like a gutter. So let's check our browser. And I'm going to inspect this. Okay. So you can see there's a grid system attached here. So anytime you inspect your browser and you have a grid, you're going to see the grid indicator there. So I'm going to click on it. Okay. And I'm going to scroll this down a bit. So you can see I have 3 columns and 3 rows. So I have this 1, this is 2, and this is 3. All right. Then here you can see okay, this is 1, this is 2, and this is 3. So there's still a lot of space that has not been used here. All right. So what I can do now is to now place these items anywhere I want. So for you to place these items, you need to utilize the numbers that are here. So each row and each column has a number. So column 1 has the number 1 to 2. So think of them as the lines, the intersecting lines. So 4 lines will give you 4 vertical lines will give you 3 columns, right? So you can see 1, 2, then 3, then we have 4 here. So let's ignore the gap that is here. There's a gap here, that's why you might want to say it's 2 lines. But if I remove the gap, maybe I should remove the gap first so that we don't get confused. So you can see it's just 1 line, okay? 1, 2, 3, then 4. To give me 3 columns. And then on the rows, we have also 4 lines. That gives me 3 rows too. So I can now choose to place any of these boxes based on these lines. So I can say I want red to be in the middle. So what I will now do, if I want red to be in the middle here, is look at the lines of both the columns and the rows. So you can see for the column, this middle part is on the column axis is from line 2 to 3, and on the row part is from line 2 to 3 too. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my CSS. And I'm going to specify that in the class. All right, in the class I want to select. So what I will now have here is grid column. All right, and I'm going to say 2 to 3. All right, and I'm going to have grid row 2 to 3 also. All right, so if I go back, you can see the yellow has moved to the center. So this grid system makes it very easy for us to place items, all right? And then another fun thing is that it's also responsive. So based on the items that are available there, or sorry, not the items, the units that you use. So why this is responsive is because I'm using a responsive unit, which is fraction. Okay, I'm not even using a responsive unit. Okay, I thought I was using a responsive unit. So by default, grid is very responsive. So it's kind of easier to use than flexbox. You know, flexbox is just one dimension. It's either a row or a column. But when you're using grid, it uses both the rows and the columns. So you can see it shrinks as the column and rows also shrink, okay? So that's what makes it responsive, and it's quite interesting to use. So I'll need a response from the chat. If I want to place the blue box in the middle of in the third row and the last column, what will be my numbers? Anybody? So I want to place this blue box here, right? So what will be the numbers for the rows? And what will be the numbers for the columns? So you notice that when I was placing the yellow box here in the middle, I used lines 2 to 3, right, for the columns, and I use lines 2 to 3 for the rows. Now I want to place it by the bottom right corner. What are the lines I'm going to use for both rows and columns? So someone said 3 to 4. Yes, 3 to 4 for both. So I think that's correct. So let's try that. So I'm going to move to the blue. So we can see the background of blue, all right? And then I'm going to, so I'm going to say the grid row. So let's use the grid column first, then grid row, 1, 2, 3, all right? And when I save it, go back to check. So we're not done yet. So we need to, let's see where we are, what we are doing wrong. Okay, so it was 1 to 3, sorry. So 3 to 4. So if we check it now, we can see the blue box has been placed by the bottom right. So that's basically how to use CSS Grid. So both must be 3 to 4. So use those lines to structure and place these items. So like before, so let me include the gap now. So remember I commented out the gap. So this gap will give gutters to it, which is the space in between the rows and the columns, right? So you can see this gap. So let me cancel my inspect. So you see how the items are visually placed now. So you can easily appreciate the beauty of CSS Grid. So CSS Grid is just about placing elements in a grid format. So this grid format is the intersection of the lines. All right, then if you want to see the grid, you can simply inspect your browser and then click on this grid. Then you see some other parameters here. So you can choose to display line numbers or not to display, but it's always advisable for you to display so that you can see where you are placing those elements. Okay. Then another thing is that this rows can expand more than one column or more than one row. All right. I can choose to say I want this blue box to expand the whole of this last row. So if I wanted to expand the whole of this last row, I'm going to start from this, so that would be column 1 to column 4, right? So let me change that. So I'll just do expand from column 1 to 4. And let's see how that will look. I think it's the width. Let's change that to max width. Column 1 to 4. I think it should be working. Let's see this first. Okay, what I'll do is, okay, let's move on. I'm going to show us a live example instead. All right, so let me just access my GitHub. And we're going to inspect that from there instead, rather than wasting time debugging. So I'm going to go to the live demo. So this is what I was trying to say. So you can see some images are longer than some, both vertically and horizontally. So you can, it's very easy to identify a grid design. All right. So you can see this image is longer, it's occupying particular widths. And this image is also occupying a particular area. Okay. So let's inspect this instead. So you can see this is container 2. I have a grid. So this is a personal project I worked on some few years back. So you can see this grid has how many columns now? It has just 3 columns too, right? And then it has how many rows? It has just 3 rows too. So this image 1, so you can see container 1. That's the image inside. So let's try and find the image. Let me find this image first. So you can see this image. So if we check the styling here, as the container. So you can see this grid column X. I hope you cannot see my screen. Is it clear enough? So this grid column is expanding from 1 to 2, all right? Okay. And then if we scroll down a little bit further to view this long image. So if we look at the image 4, you can see it's expanding 2 rows. So it's expanding from the second row to the fourth line on the third row. Okay. So it's expanding from line 2 to line 4, and the grid column is just 3 to 4. So I can choose to turn this off, and you see where it expands to. You can see it's just taking up just this part. It's no longer reaching the third row, but I can still activate it again. Right, and now we have our grid back. Okay, so that's just a brief explanation of grid. So more materials have been posted on the MarkTechie platform. So let's do well to go through them. All right, then we can also practice a few of these concepts that have been shown to us. All right. So now let's move to responsive design. So what exactly is responsive design? So responsive design is an approach to web design that aims to make web pages render well on all devices and screen sizes. I mentioned it before, that we need to have the same comfortable feel that we have on laptops, on our mobile phones, or on our tablets too. So rather than creating different HTML codes or different web codes or web designs for each device, why don't we just make a single design and make it able to adjust to all the screen sizes, right? I think that makes much more sense than creating different designs for different devices. So we can just create one design and then make it adjust to different devices on our web page, okay? So we can adjust these designs from large desktop monitors to small mobile phones. So each of these devices have a breakpoint, right? So if I go back to my browser and I choose to make this responsive, so you can see at the top corner here, this is showing responsive. Then if I click on it, you can see I have different devices, different simulation of devices. So if I click on this, you can see it still looks beautiful on this Galaxy Note screen. So each mobile device or each tablet device or each desktop device has a breakpoint. That is the width. So the height does not really matter. It is this width that matters. So the width of this phone is 412 pixels. So you need to specify at each width where you will need all these breakpoints to come in. All right. So if you look at it on Android 11 too, same width, can look at it from S10, this Galaxy S10. So you might want to drop your device name so that we can see how it looks like on your device. So who wants to volunteer to drop his device name? So let's see iPhone 11 Pro Max. So this is how the website will look on in iPhone 11 Pro Max. So you can see it still houses the same beauty. So Oppo, let me see if we have Oppo. So there are quite a number of devices. Oppo, I don't think Mozilla Firefox has Oppo. Yes, let me look at another one. Redmi, I don't think it will be there. Any iPhone user in the house? So iPhone. Okay, let's just use maybe iPhone 12 and 13 Pro. So you can see this is iPhone 13. Okay, 12 Pro Max. We have 12 Pro Max. I think this is it. Okay, this is Pro. Okay, this is Pro Max. So this is how it will look like on the Pro Max, right? So you can see it's adjusting to every screen size. So let me take it back to being responsive. I'm just going to increase this back. So this is the desktop size, right? So if I continue to shrink the screen size, watch how it adjusts. You can see the images are also shrinking. You can see the image was shrinking and then it became bigger again, right? So that's the work of the responsive design. All right, so there are some elements that are being used in this responsive design. So you can see that I don't think there is any screen size up to 234. I think the list is 275. 275. So this is how it will look like on a screen with 275. So you can see the images shrink with the design. So this is an example of a responsive design. So let me close this. The responsive design should be able to adjust to a change in screen size. That's what makes a good responsive design. So how do we make our designs responsive? Okay, so let's look at that. So I'll just mention two main things. So the first one is to use responsive units and properties. So we have some properties that make these designs responsive. So I use percentage a lot because percentage is, I think, is one of the most used and it's quite easy. So if I remember we talked about positioning in our first class of CSS, where we're mentioning relative, absolute, static, sticky, and the like. So this percentage is, so when you say something is 50% of the screen size, what that means is there is it's taking a certain amount of percentage from the web page or the screen. So, okay, let me just list out all the units and properties that you might most likely use. There are quite a lot of them, but the ones that you might most likely use are percentage. You might need to use view height, but it's not really necessary sometimes, okay? So view height is the height of your screen, what you want to see when the screen is on the web page. So most times you see 100 view height, okay? So when your screen is static, you want to determine the minimum height that will be visible to the user. Same thing as view width. So you usually see 100 view width, 100 view height. So it's taking like 100% of the viewport. But this is not necessary because we have already defined it in our HTML. So if you go back, so you can see this meta tag that is here. There's always in your head element. Can we all see it? If you can see it, let's just type yes. So you can see this meta name tag viewport and then width device width. So you don't need to define view height or viewport anymore because you already have that meta tag that does that for you. And then you can see initial scale 1.0. So it takes in the full screen height and screen width of that particular device. Okay, so you don't need to define it all the time. But if you are not satisfied with what you are seeing, you can adjust it. Okay. So again, you also have rem. So rem is one of the units you will use a lot. So one rem is equals to 16 pixels, okay? So there is also the conversion aspect of CSS. So it's available on the MarkTech platform. Let's take it. So one rem represents 16 pixels. Then two rems will be what? Who can tell me what two rems is? If one rem is 16 pixels, then two rems will be what in pixels? Anybody? Can anybody give us the answer to that? If one rem is equals to 16 pixels, then two rems will be equals to what? So while I'm still waiting for the answer, so rems are majorly used to define the font size and any other thing you have. So for example, we have this padding here. Okay, I think we have some, yeah, so the answer is 32 pixels. So it's just basic maths. So if one rem is equal to 16 pixels, then two rems will be 32 pixels, then three rems will be 48 pixels, okay? So what we have here is 40 pixels, right? So if I want to convert this to rem now, so rem is taking the relative, is taking the font size. So, okay, in this case of padding, so if I say this padding is 2 rem, that means it's taken from the base pixel of the root element, which is the HTML element, and then converting it to rem. So if the root element is 32 pixels, and I say something is 2 rem, that will be like half of the base. No, it will be times 2 of the base root, or the base pixel of the root. So if the root element has a padding of 32 pixels, and I say something is 2 rem, so it's relative to that base pixel of the root element. So when I increase it, it will also increase. When I reduce it, it will also reduce. So do you get it? But if I use these 40 pixels, this one is static. It will always remain the same. So let's say in math, I say something is x. So x is equals to 32 pixels, right? And then I now come and say, okay, this padding, I want it to be 2x. You know that when this one increases, this 2x will also increase. Am I right? And when this x reduces to, this 2x will also reduce. Do we get it now? So that is what makes it responsive. So as the root size is decreasing, it will also decrease. And as the root size is increasing, it will also increase. So that's what makes rem a responsive unit. So if I want to convert this to rem, so 1 rem is equals to 16 pixels, right? So 40 pixels will be what in rem? So that will be 40 divided by 16. So 40 divided by 16, I get 2.5 rem. So instead of including 40 pixels here, I can just do 2.5 rem. So anytime the base font size or the base size of the root element, which is the HTML element, reduces, then this one will also reduces. So the change in screen size does not affect it that much. So although there might be sometimes that you might need to change this rem size, maybe it's too big, then you can go to a lower size. So you can even have 0.5 rem, that's like half. So if 1 rem is equal to 16 pixels, then 0.5 rem would be 8 pixels. So it's just divided by 2. All right, I hope you get it. So we also use the m, then the fraction. Yeah, so this 1FR is usually used for grid. So in our grid example, we can, instead of putting 300 pixels here, can simply use 1FR. 1FR, sorry. So that's like 1 fraction of the screen. So it will be, the screen will be the one to determine the size of that fraction. Okay, so let me go back to our browser. So can you see it occupies the whole width of the screen now? So based on how wide the screen is, it will continue to adjust. But this particular column now is 1 fraction, 1 fraction, then 1 fraction. Okay, so it will be the one to determine that. Then we also have the auto. So auto is just like the fraction too. It will adjust automatically based on the width size. Okay. Then we also have the other properties like the max width and the max height. We also have the minimum width and the minimum height too. So when I give something a maximum height, I'm saying it must not exceed that height. So if I say something has a maximum height of 50 pixels, that means once it reaches 50 pixels, it cannot exceed 50 pixels, but can go from 50 pixels and below. If I say minimum height, I'm saying it must start from 50 pixels. That means the minimum value it can have is 50 pixels and then above. All right. So one is to use responsive units and properties. Then the other is to use media queries. So these media queries are quite useful. So a particular rule about media queries is that your media queries must not be too much. So if your media query is getting too much, maybe like you're having maybe 6 media queries or 7, that means your design is not using enough responsive units. So you might want to fix that. So I remember, let's go to so I completed the live practice that we did. So I think, okay, this is it. So I'm going to show us that a live practice session we did last time. Okay, so I'll cancel this, cancel this. So if you check my live practice of CSS, I only used one media query, only just one. And that's so the reason why we use one, so some we use 2, some we use 3. So that's why it's usually advisable to start from a mobile design first, then you proceed towards a desktop design. So the desktop breakpoint is 1024, but I chose to use 1044. Okay, so let's view this. So I can go live. So let's see how it look like. So this is the desktop design, right? How many of us have submitted our assignments? I only saw a few people that submitted. So if you have not submitted, please submit. So grading will start today. All right, so let's be encouraged to do our assignment and submit on the platform. So you'll also be able to view your scores on the platform. All right. So if I make this responsive, you can see this is 275, and you can see how it looks at 275, okay? All right. So another thing you can do is to use as many responsive units as possible so that you don't have to use too many media queries, okay? So you can see the way it goes from a column and then divides into 2 columns. Yeah, so this is using Flexbox though, not CSS Grid. So you can see the image is shrinking with the screen size and expanding as the screen size also increases, okay? So this is how it's supposed to be. So I'm only able to use one media query because I use enough responsive units. So if you check the units for all this, you see maybe it's either rem or any other responsive unit or percentage. But for images, I like to use percentage. So percentage is most efficient for images. So let's look for, okay. So the only place where you want to use pixels or static units might be either the gap or the margins, paddings, or font size sometimes. Okay, but it's also okay to use responsive units for font sizes if you're having issues with the responsiveness. Okay, so you can see this is the image container and I have a max width. So here now, I'm not using a responsive unit. I'm using a responsive property. So I'm saying that image container must not be more than 539.22 pixels. Okay. And it must not have a height more than 447.43 pixels. So this is what makes it responsive. That means it can occupy any height from 0 to 447, and then from 0 to 539. And then you can see here, I'm using a responsive unit for the image. So this one is for the image container. I used a responsive property, and here I'm using a responsive unit. All right, are we following? So if you are following, kindly type in yes. So this percentage and this max width now is what is controlling this image, the way the image responds. Are we getting it? So the way the image responds is controlled by the percentage. So it's taking like a particular, I want this, I said the width should be 100%, right? So 100% of what? 100% of this container. I hope we get it now because the image is inside the image container. So it should take up 100% of the container. So if the container reduces to 1 pixels, you still take up 100% of 1 pixel. So that is why the image is responding to this. I can say the image should be 80%, should be 90%, or any percentage of my liking, all right? So I've showed us where I use a responsive property, that's max width and max height, and a responsive unit, okay? Then let's see again. So you can see I also use max width here. So I was controlling the container. But all these pixels too, you can choose to convert them to rem. So you just divide the pixel value by 16. So if I wanted to convert this to rem, I would just say 586 divided by 16. That's like 36 rem. I hope I'm correct. Can somebody help me cross-check that? That's like 36 rem. So I'll be waiting for that response. So 36 rem should be around 586 pixels. So just do 586 divided by 16 to get about 36 rem. So you can choose to convert all this to rem or m. Okay. So let's see. So down to the media query now. So this is a media query. So how you write a media query is by using the @media sign. All right. So use the @media sign. Then you need to specify the screen and the maximum width of that screen. If you are going from desktop to mobile. So for example, if I started building on desktop and I want to shrink it down to mobile, I'm going to be using max width. But if I'm going from mobile to desktop, I'm going to be using minimum width. Why? Because if I'm shrinking down from desktop to mobile, I'm going to be saying, okay, when this screen gets to, so from, let's say 1024, when it gets to 728, I want the layout to be like this. Do we get it? So that width must not exceed 768. 768 is tablet breakpoint. Okay, so if we are shrinking down, we use max width. That means it must not exceed 786. But if we are expanding upwards, we'll use minimum width. That means when it exceeds a particular width, not when it gets to a particular width. I hope we are following. So you type in the screen, okay, and then you have, so you place this in parentheses. So I'm using mean width, and then you now have to specify the width. So when it gets to 375 pixels, what should now happen? That's when you now start readjusting the element. So you can now adjust the padding of the body. Maybe the padding was too much before, you can reduce it. So you now start picking any elements that you need to be adjusted here, maybe the logo, the main, the image, and all of that. You now start putting them inside the breakpoint. So let's look at the one I did. So, but the rule is that you must not have too many media queries. If you're having too many media queries, that means you've not mastered responsive design yet. Yeah, so somebody said 36.6, thank you. So let me go and change that to 36.6. All right. So you can always change these pixel values to rem or percentage. But don't change font size to percentage. It might not be easy to track. So it's either you use rem or use m, but most preferably you use rem. Then when it comes to images, use percentages, and gaps too, you can use percentage too, right? So you can see, so after selecting or setting the breakpoints for this media query, okay, so when it's more than 768 pixels, then so I adjusted the main section. That's why it's going from column to row. So this is what is responsible for that. So let's go back to our browser. So once the screen size exceeds that 768, so watch the screen size here, the screen width rather. Watch the screen width from here. When it gets to 768, so you see what will happen. So you can see this is 769, right? It's still in the flex direction of row. But when it gets to 768 now, or when it's below it gets converted to column. So the default is column. This was default. So when it exceeds 768, it now go to row. Okay. So you can even increase from here. So let me just put at 768. And then, so this is 768. If I do 767, you see that it's in a column format. But when it gets to 768, becomes row. So the code responsible for that is this, all right? So I adjusted the main section when it gets to the minimum height of 768 pixels. And you can see me adjusting the font sizes and all too, all right? So a better approach to be used rem, but just for the sake of being simple enough. I didn't want to jump ahead, you get. That's why I prefer to use pixels. But naturally, as you get better, you start to see the importance of using rem when it comes to responsive units, or when it comes to font sizes, max width, and responsive properties, okay? So I basically increased all the sizes here that were in pixels. So let's compare just the H2 section to the H2 section I had before. So this was like 586 pixels. Font size was 48. So let's check. They see the same thing. Font size is still 48. Line height was 95. So you can see the line height here was 71. So these two, I didn't need to include it back again. So you can just so any element that doesn't need changing, you can just leave it out. So line height is 95 pixels, then letter spacing. So you can see me using percentage here. So minus 3.5%. That's to make the spacing closer. So you can see the same thing. So the only thing I needed to change here was the line height. So I can just delete it out. So anything that I want to change from the CSS, the main CSS, once you are doing media queries, you just need to select only the one that's necessary for change. If other properties don't need to be changed, then you don't need to include them in the media query. Okay, do we all understand how media queries work now? So media queries, you use the @media and then you select the screen and the minimum width of the screen. Then whatever you want to adjust at that particular screen size, then you start putting them inside of the media query. All right. If we are still following, let's type yes. Okay, so let's move on. So why responsive design is very crucial. So responsive design is very crucial because it gives us that improved user experience. So whether you are using the device, whether you're using the website or the web application on a mobile phone, or a tablet, or your desktop, you don't feel that change, or you still experience the same feeling while using it. So that's the reason for responsive design, why it's crucial. So it provides a seamless and enjoyable experience for users regardless of their device. Then wider audience. So some people don't have desktop. Some people don't have laptops. Some people don't have tablets, but they are all able to access these websites or web pages. So regardless of whether you only have a phone or you have both phone and laptop, or you have a laptop and you don't have a phone, you are still able to access the same service. So you are not stranded, all right? Then we also have SEO benefits. So the SEO benefits are, SEO is referred to as search engine optimization. So basically, search engines favor mobile-friendly websites, and responsive design helps to consolidate SEO efforts on a single website. So you can see that meta tag I showed you. It's also part of the things that contributes to SEO. So you can check it again. In our HTML, we can see this meta and then with the name of viewport. So this is an example of what is being said. So this contributes to improving the SEO and also being enjoying SEO benefits. Then it's cost effective in the sense that you don't have to design or have a different design or write a different code for mobile devices, for tablet devices, or desktop devices. So we can use the same code and make it adjust to each devices based on their screen width. Okay, and then we also have future proofing. So as new devices come out, you can see the Samsung Galaxy Fold now. When the Samsung Galaxy Fold came out, many front-end developers are complaining that how would they be able to design for devices like that? But responsive design has covered it all. So with an edge of CSS, Flexbox, and all, you are able to design for such devices. So as new devices continue to emerge, you will be able to effectively design this for any device that you come across, okay? So I hope we get it. So in conclusion, grid systems provide the essential structure and organization for web content. So we've talked about grid before. So grid is very, very delicate and very easy to use. It won't stress you as much as Flexbox, but it's not as common as Flexbox. So you should know when to use grid and you should know when to use Flexbox, okay? So responsive design ensures that this structure adapts seamlessly to diverse range of devices that users employ. So that's the difference between a grid system and responsive design. So they are both advanced concepts of CSS. And by understanding and combining these two powerful concepts, either you're a web developer or a web designer, you can be able to create websites that are not only visually appealing, but that also provide optimal and consistent user experiences for everyone and everywhere. Okay, so understanding these grid systems and responsive design will boost your skills and your knowledge of front-end systems, because every framework is actually built on these fundamental concepts. So if you use CSS libraries like Tailwind or Bootstrap and the likes, so you see that you are able to apply this CSS concept in there also. So let's do well to take this seriously. Try to understand it. If you don't understand, you can always review these materials again and again, all right? So that brings us to the end of today's class. So do we have any questions? Do do we have any questions? So for those of us asking of attendance, the attendance will be dropped now. So the attendance will be dropped now. So the admins will do that. Okay. So do we have any questions? Any questions? So the attendance will be dropped shortly. Let's fill the attendance before we start to exit the meeting. So for the soft copy of the slides is in the resource section. It will be uploaded to the resource section of the MacTechie platform. So check the resource section.
In progress.
So everything is there. So the attendance has been dropped. Let's do it to fill it in. So any resource or assignment you are trying to find, you can always find them on the MacTechie platform. And I think there's meant to be a quiz next week, I think. So the quiz will be based on all the modules that have been done from week 1 to week 5 or 6. So let's do well to take the course. Then those of us that have not been able to onboard onto the platform, let's reach out to the proper personnel. Okay. Please, if the link is not working, check your network or refresh. And if it's still not working, you can follow the instructions. So a new link has been posted. Let's try that. If it still doesn't work, then that means the problem is from your end. So you can follow the instructions to ensure that you submit your attendance. But from the other link, 32 responses have been received. So it's probably from your own end. So let's keep trying the link. If it still doesn't work, then follow the instructions I was sent in the broadcast. Okay, can I ask a question? Okay, if you want to unmute, just raise your hand so that I can easily find you. So you can unmute and ask your question.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Yes, sir. Okay, sir, please, I have a question about some of the assignments we were given last week.
Okay.
Okay, the assignments are like, is there a particular deadline to the assignment, or are we going to keep getting assignment and then we'll submit everything at the end of the class?
For those assignments, there's no deadline yet. So because of people that have not been onboarded, so
Okay,
it's
sir.
expected that once you're onboarded, you take the assignments after every module. So you see that the assignments have been named after every module. So let's say I finish module 2, I'm expected to take the module 2 assignments. So there's no peculiar deadline for now. But once all the students are onboarded, there will be a deadline.
Okay. Okay, so the other question I have is that some of the apps that were recommended for people that are not that do not have laptop available, you will not be able to download extensions on some of those apps. Is there any app that will be able to do that, maybe on a mobile phone?
I'm
Like,
only aware of an online ID. I don't really use coding
okay,
environments on mobile, but you can try Replit. There's a free version of it where you can type in HTML and CSS.
okay, thank you, sir.
So I'll type the ID in the coding section,
Okay,
comment section rather, replit.com. So you can just check it out.
all right, thank you, sir.
So for those of us that are saying the attendance link is not working, is working, please change your network, refresh your browser, try a new browser. If it still doesn't work, then you might need to follow the instructions that were sent in the broadcast. All right. So let's keep on filling the attendance while we wrap up.
Hello. Hello. Yeah, please, for every one of us that are still listening, fine, the instructor told you that there's no deadline. Yeah, there's no date for deadline, but does not mean that you should leave your assignments or quizzes undone. Ensure that you attend promptly to your deadline. If not, the backlogs will be on you, and by the time it closes, there will be a deadline. Right. Ensure you tell others that your assignments are to be promptly attended to. You've had 5 or so weeks. You are going into your 6th week of engagement. Ensure that you complete all your assignments. Coming week, be prepared for what do you call it? A mid-term engagement assessment. I'm sure that has been communicated to you. Please, Emmanuel, send this to all the groups and let everyone tell others. Send it to the YouTube group as well. Communicate to others and ensure that you know. Don't hang until when it is closed that you can't have access to it again. Thank you.
Okay, so let's do well to follow all that has been said. So if you are unable to fill the attendance still, just follow the instructions that have been sent in the attendance broadcast. So just send your details to the number that was sent, that was tagged in that message. All right. So we're still expecting more questions. So let's fill the attendance for those that are able to fill for a round up. All right, I'd like to thank everybody for coming. So next week, we'll be starting with JavaScript, and we hope to see you there. Thank you. The assignments are on the MarkTech platform. So the recommended application, as one is asking on YouTube, the coding environment I use is Visual Studio. You can easily download that online. So just go to your browser, search for Visual Studio Code. All right. So I've also included the link in the slides. Let's check it out. If you are not able to access the link from the slides, and simply, maybe I'll upload the resource for that. Okay, I think that will be better. Mr. Abdulhamid, you came late. The attendance link has been posted already. So the broadcast will end in 2 minutes. So for those of us that have still not filled the attendance, there's the attendance link. All right. Good night, or have a nice day, everyone. See you guys next week.